Well, it looks like they shook up the roster again. So we're coming to the end of this little project, and this is one of those self-inflicted wounds where I was plowing the driveway and I backed the big International all chained up into the tire and proceeded to break the spindle right at the end here. And I came out in the spring and I see this thing sitting down. I'm like, what do I have, a flat tire? And realized that the entire tire was broke right off. Well, the spindle was, so therefore the tire hub, everything was separated away from the machine. So our first thought was it was a welded on spindle. We're gonna get another one welded on. So I used the battery operated Bauer angle grinder and cut the axle off, right? Or is it? It's in here somewhere. This thing right here. Thing worked great. Cut that spindle right off. My neighbor, who I do a fair amount of hay work with, he has hay, so do I, has it's an older hay bine, and he was kind of parting it out, and one of the things he was able to cut out with a torch was another spindle. And it was a little bit different. It had a larger diameter. It was the shaft was 1.5 inches, and the one that was on here was 1.25 inches. But I didn't know that at the time. So he came over. We were gonna weld it on. And when you looked at it under all the dirt, it did look like a welded on spindle. So I went and took my Harbor Freight hand grinder with a cutting wheel, and I cut the thing flush, and then realized that no, it was not welded on. In fact, there was a nice clean delineation of a hole, that the thing was a slip fit or an interference fit with a hole. And on further investigation found out that there's an access hole right here, and then there was a bolt, and the bolt came out over here somewhere. I don't know if you can see that. So we realized that was actually a part that can come out. So took the bolt out, and there was another bolt underneath right here. That was to adjust the camber of the axle. Took them both out, and then realized that was rusted in. So we had to come up with an innovative way to get that apart. And what I ended up doing, this is kind of embarrassing, but was taking that plate right there, and I had drilled and tapped a hole in the end of the spindle that I just finished cutting off, right? And I put a bolt in there and used that big heavy plate like a slide hammer and hammered on that pretty hard, and eventually was able to hammer out that axle using that big plate and a sledgehammer to and that threaded hole with a threaded rod to beat the thing out, and realized it was in fact an interference fit right down there. So started measuring it, realized this was a machined 1.25 inches, and of course this was as well. So it was an interference fit once you got to that little point. So went down to the tractor dealer and was informed that yeah, the part's available, $300. And because we were deciding, do I try to make something or do I go buy something and make it really quick and easy just to slip it right in there? Well, Doug convinced me that an afternoon doing Walther things on a lathe is probably a better economic decision than spending $300 and having it shipped a week and a half later. So that's what we did. I'll show pictures of this as we go along. But when slide hammers fail, well, I
I think I can do something like this maybe.
Yeah, and I can hammer on it again.
Try it. There, I can hold it here. Get that bolt out of there, oh.
Yeah, at least
So that's the size you're gonna have to have. And that is right full of shit there. Maybe we can blow it out or something.
I want to see what the difference in axle size between yours and it.
You know, it's bigger, I know that.
Bigger and longer.
Now, the longer part ain't gonna matter. Your tires stick out a little longer. That ain't gonna hurt nothing.
Yeah, I can probably turn that down.
It got notched some, but there's nothing I can do. But the way it was made, the way it was put in that frame, they put it in and welded it in. So I ended up and cutting the welds. That's why I had a hell of a time getting it out.
Well, if I can hold it. See, I don't need the full length, right? I only need...
You know, you don't, but we're going to have to drill a hole through it anyway.
Didn't realize, really, it was just a replaceable spindle. But it wouldn't come out. So I drilled and tapped a hole, put a piece of thread rod in there, and then used a big old plate of steel off a snowplow and pounded it out. And got this one from my neighbor who used a torch to cut it off a hay bine. It's 1.5 inches, and this is like 1.25 inches. So what we're going to do is pull the hub off of this thing. I'm going to chuck up that spindle on the lathe and turn it down to this diameter, and then take the drill press and drill out that hole and make another one. The thought to myself, I haven't done a good video in a long time. This is actually a decent video, but it's not exactly what I want to be doing today. I'd rather be running that Holes Former saw. I was loading up with saws to go out and do some more logging and realized that got to get that baler fixed. Basically what I did was I took that New Holland spindle that was 1.5 inches diameter, and I turned it down to the 1.25 inches that the one that came out of this machine required. I actually had it about 1/1000 or 2 larger, so instead of being 1.250, I made that last like 1/4 inch 1.252, and then in back of that I've narrowed it down to 1.48 or so it was slipped through the hole. And then at the very end I went back to the 1.25. So there was an ever so slight taper I machined into it, but this is an interference fit, and back there was an interference fit. So once we had it machined, I chopped off the thing I was holding on to, came out here, tapped it in, actually had to drill a hole right for that bolt, everything lined right up, hammered it right in there, and saved ourselves $300. Now I'll intersperse pictures through this narrative, I guess. That's the spindle we machined, right? It came off. What'd that come off of?
That?
Yeah.
Oh, the New Holland hay bine.
So we took a New Holland hay bine spindle, turned it down the lathe, drilled a hole in it, and there it is. But right now, I guess I'm going back to this beast. This is what we use to take the tire on and off again. And I did a video on this, oh my God, 2020 I think it was. And this thing here has been a godsend. It may not be their best brand, Bauer, you know, it's kind of like their mid-range tools. But man, I've got a lot of these things and they work well. And they don't seem to die, at least at the level of use that I'm doing. And I'm not a professional, obviously. So I don't have a camera, I don't have a stand. I just have the phone. I'm going to button this thing up with this wrench and call it a night and maybe put together a short little video. I might add in a little bit of the weekend. Man, I saw more fireworks up at Higley Flow than I've ever seen in my life. And it was 2 nights full. One was what they call the River of Lights, where everybody puts flares out in their front yard. So I'll show some pictures of that. And then during that night on the 3rd, there was a lot of the homeowners putting on their own fireworks show, and it was pretty spectacular. And then on the 4th, another set of homeowners, the ones that had the real money, one of them had a license for fireworks. They put on a show that would rival the towns for sure. So it was just non-stop fireworks for those 2 days up there on the Raquette River in South Colton, New York. It was really, really cool. So I'll put some video of that in there as well. So anyway. This is going to strip those things right out, give them a chance. So, bearing's nice. Put a whole lot of grease in there. So I think it's time to set this thing down and let it do its thing, for better or for worse.